So good morning, everyone. My name is Lucille Karatzis, and I am one of the people that works with TLC. And I am happy to invite you all to this Ask TLC, Finding Your Groove as an Introvert in the Villages. And we are very fortunate to have two of my favorite introverts presenting today, Karen Haskell and Karen Parks. And those two ladies by themselves can dispel the negativity around the word Karen. So I'm happy to introduce them and very, very pleased that they took the time to prepare this presentation for all you introverts and for all the people who have introverts in their lives and want to understand them better. Karen Haskell, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Introverts unite. When Karen and I saw that there were 30 plus people who had signed up for this, I felt, wow, this must be the biggest meeting of introverts in the villages. Why? Because introverts by nature don't enjoy big groups. But this is a perfect situation. We're together and yet we are by ourselves. So welcome to our program. I'm Karen Haskell and my co-presenter is Karen Parks. We all know as introverts that introverts and extroverts have a very different way of relating to life. We're also in the minority. 2/3 of the population in the villages and in the United States are extroverts. Are you beginning to wonder why sometimes you don't feel perhaps that you're with it? And the villages is one of just such a social community that I suspect they may be more than 2/3. At least at some times, that's how I feel about it. Now, Karen, what are your thoughts as we're kicking things off?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for having the courage to come this morning and to learn more about yourself. I applaud you all because it isn't easy for an introvert to be part of a group. So, if you've ever felt that you were a misfit or that your introversion was some kind of a character flaw, we're hoping to show you that that is simply not true. In fact, we've learned so much about it that we're beginning to see introversion as a gift. And we hope by the end of this presentation, you'll see it as a gift too. So let's talk about the things that are difficult for you. And I can speak about the things that are difficult for me. First thing is small talk. I've never, ever, all my life, even as a child, liked small talk. I enjoy speaking to people about things of importance and go deep. That's the way. Excuse me. Loud crowds, loud noise is difficult for me. Crowded places. Sometimes the grocery store is too crowded for me and I come back another time. And talking to groups, that's difficult, especially strangers. Karen, what about you? Do you have some things that I have missed?
Well, you touched on it, Karen. Sometimes I'm told after I get to know someone that I'm aloof or I'm unsociable. And it takes a while for them to reach out to me because I seem self-contained, that I don't need them. When in fact I do, although I'm pretty happy with myself as well. So I guess that's a bit of a conundrum. Meetings and conversations. You know, extroverts, they just love to talk and they get in groups and I kind of come up to a group and it's hard for me to get a word in edgewise. And they'll say something, and I'll think of this really funny thing to say at the time. But by the time I get in, they've changed the subject and they're on to something else. And I guess the last thing, which I don't think extroverts have any idea of, is I get really tired out in the world.
Oh, yes.
It takes an enormous amount of energy for me to talk in a group or to wiggle my way into a conversation. And I get very, very tired. and I have to leave that environment and go and re-energize because I'm exhausted. So I
Right.
think those are the greatest impacts on me, Karen.
Yeah. So Lou, can we see the picture of what introverts love? Okay, this is a little cartoon that really speaks to the things that I enjoy. I love rainy days. I really do. It's a chance to just hunker down and read or whatever. And I prefer text messages over a phone call. I'd much prefer to get a text message. In fact, I like to do a lot of things in writing rather than in speaking. Recharging is important. And I've learned to schedule my time so I do have time, breaks in between things to recharge, because you have to. I need it. Canceled plans, that's okay with me. I'm quite content staying home. And as I said before, deep conversations, daydreaming. Oh, yeah, I love to lay in a hammock and look at the clouds and just daydream. That's one of my favorite things. Solo activities like reading, there's your stack of books, and painting. So, yes, painting is a solo activity, and I do a little bit of that. And I love my home. I love being at home.
So I suspect people are seeing a lot of similarities, Karen, with our favorite things. I will confess that when I have a golf reservation and I wake up raining, I say, oh boy, I could read a book today. So yes, I love all of those same things. You've alluded, Karen, to, why are we different? We're different because we're wired differently. Your nervous system and your brain are very different as an introvert from an extrovert. Introverts are very sensitive. Their nervous system is just out there, and everything provides too much stimulation. They get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
And
there we
so
go.
we go back to our inside, which is where we get our energy and where we feel terrific. Whereas the extroverts, they are not sensitive to stimulation. And so for them to feel good, they have to seek it out. And that's why they talk a lot and they laugh a lot and they congregate, because the more people they can talk to, the more energized and better that they feel. Whereas the introvert gets energized by going inside because they don't want too much stimulation and they can control it when it's inside. A wonderful example is a barbecue or a cocktail party. Now, you all know what those look like and feel like. You approach the door, you scan the room, you've got groups of people there talking and laughing, and you say, okay, that's a possibility. And then you look around the room, around the edges, and that's where you're going to find us, because those groups are too energetic for us. So we tend to go to the corners, or we tend, as we scan the room, to find another introvert. Now, we don't call them an introvert, but they're by themselves. And we love one-on-one conversations. And so there's a person we're going to go talk to. And in that conversation, unlike the extroverts will be talking surface conversation. Introverts like in-depth conversations. And when you're only talking to one person, you come away having perhaps made a friend because you have had a significant relationship with them. Another example, which is kind of fun, and I don't think you'll ever find an extrovert put themselves in a closet. But if they did and closed the door, in less than an hour, they will stagger out of that closet exhausted, because they haven't had any external stimulation. So they're exhausted. Now you put one of us in that closet for an hour and we come out refreshed. We've had a great time in that closet with ourselves,
With our own thoughts.
with our own thoughts. That's right. We have a wonderful time. In fact, I'm going to predict that if you're an extrovert and you climb in the car to drive, let's say 2 hours, you'll turn the radio on as soon as you get in the car. An introvert probably doesn't even turn on the radio at all, and they have a great time, as you're saying, Karen, with themselves the whole 2 hours.
Mhm.
There is a saying, if you don't know what an extrovert is saying, you haven't been listening. Extroverts share freely any thought that comes into their minds, because remember, that's where they get their energy. If you don't know what an introvert is saying, you haven't asked, because we do not share freely. We've got lots of thoughts, but we don't initiate the conversation. So if you see one of us in a corner and we look interesting, come over and you initiate the conversation.
Mhm.
Are we going to talk about common characteristics, Karen?
Sure, let's do that. Time alone is important to us, but it's more than important to it. It's essential. We have to have the time in our own head space to figure out what we're going to do, what we want to do. I mean, our time spent thinking is so important to us. Too much time with people is very draining. So draining, in fact, that we have to leave early sometimes, and that's okay. We get depleted by all the outside energy that's coming in. We rely on our own inner wisdom or intuition and our inner experience to know what we're doing. We don't look for outside confirmation. We have to get in touch with our introspective nature as often as we can. We have to exert an extra effort to meet new people, and sometimes we postpone that because it's uncomfortable for us. Karen, what about you? Do you have any?
Oh, yes. I mean, there's a long list because we're pretty distinctive.
Mhm.
We're often very good at writing because that's an isolated, we don't need anyone else to do it. We're often artists because these are things that you do alone. So we prefer writing rather than picking up the telephone. We're not very good at outside observations because we live in an internal world. So we may not be too aware of details in our environment. We're generally, this is important for extroverts to know, we are generally difficult to get to know. And from what we've been saying, that's not a surprise. We don't offer information. And so when someone meets us, they have to do a little bit of work to get to know us. As we get to know them, we become much more extroverted in sharing ourselves, but initially not so. We dislike, and you said this, Karen, we dislike small talk. And that's why those cocktail parties just are no fun for us. In fact, when I arrive late, so I'm shortening the amount of time I have to spend there, and I leave early, I've already figured out the minute I arrive when I'm going to be leaving, unless I get into a really neat conversation with one person. And then I'll stay longer. And sometimes I surprise myself because I have stayed so much longer. So what are our strengths? We've been talking about, what makes us, let's say, interesting or different from extroverts. Remember, 2/3 of our culture in the United States and here in the villages are extroverts. And so they are seeking out stimulation, whereas we are staying within ourselves. But some people think that you remember the 2008 downturn in the economy? Some psychologists are blaming extroverts for that because they think that the extroverts were so busy talking to one another, talking over one another, just throwing ideas out. They didn't pay attention to the introverts at the table who were thinking very carefully, listening to everything, and would have come up with a good solution. Extroverts are like the Nike ad, you know, that sneaker ad, just do it.
Do it.
They are so into the energy of it and the fun of interacting and talking over one another and laughing, that they aren't paying attention to what might work or what might not. They have also found, researchers, when they looked at the big companies, the big 500 companies, that often the most successful companies were led by introverts. Now, that's a surprise to us because often we see the spokesperson, the president of an organization, you know, giving a speech, and they are very extroverted. Well, extroverts often become leaders because they're the ones that talk and they're the ones that offer ideas. But the research is showing that some of the most successful companies are led by introverts. They don't seek the limelight. They are very happy to sit and listen to their staff propose ideas. So there's a problem. They listen to the ideas, they come up with solutions, and they offer them, which is much, much better for the success of a company. Now, introverts are reserved, we're mild-mannered, and we're understated. At the same time, because of those characteristics, we don't get attention. And so sometimes we feel, I don't know, underappreciated. But you know, if we haven't offered our idea, how can anybody appreciate us? So Karen, what's research showing in terms of creativity?
Well, I want to backtrack just a little bit here and say, even though extroverts predominate in the leadership category, there are plenty of leaders from our history who have been introverts. Barack Obama was an introvert. Abraham Lincoln was an introvert. Einstein was an introvert. And in the entertainment world, people you would never guess. Lady Gaga is an introvert. Meryl Streep, Bob Dylan, Prince, even Taylor Swift. As much as she's on TV, she's an introvert.
Wow, I bet she goes back to her dressing room after a
I
performance.
bet she does. But research is showing that many of our creative people, and I've just named a few, are introverts because introverts thrive on self-directed activities, isolated activities such as painting, writing, all of those things, composing. Many songwriters are introverts. And so they're able to work independently and really focus and get things done.
I'm thinking of Barbara Streisand.
Oh yes, she's a major
You know, in her movies, she's often this brash character, and here she's an introvert.
Yeah. So how do we make a happy life here in the villages as an introvert? That's what this presentation's all about. And we're going to brainstorm after with all of you. But for right now, let's say this. You need to accept and appreciate your strengths for what they are. Lower your expectations for the larger world. You don't have to please anybody but yourself. You'd be uncomfortable in the limelight anyway. So do what makes you comfortable. Know yourself and think before you say yes. It's okay to say no. And it's okay to leave early like Karen does, right? Put yourself into situations that you enjoy and thrive. That means small groups. And I know you like to go down to the square like everybody does, like those extroverts do, but you don't have to sit right next to the stage. You could sit across the street on the sidewalk, bring your own chairs, listen to the music, get up and dance with your honey a little bit on the sidewalk if you want, and leave when you're tired. You don't have to be part of the crowd. So it's manageable. I think every situation is manageable, even in some of these clubs and groups that you go to. If it's a large group, you can find your people if you put a little effort in and sit with them. Sit with the ones who are quietly listening. Don't sit with the ones that are loud and brash, because they'll just distract you and make you uncomfortable. Karen?
Yeah, the word that comes to mind listening to you, Karen, is control and expectations. And I think somehow
Right.
when I walk into that party or barbecue, I look at the group, of extroverts who are having a great time. And I'm sorry that I can't join them, but that's not who I am. And so I think that's what you were talking about with expectations. That is not something I enjoy, although I can appreciate it for the people who are enjoying it. And so being true to yourself, which is having enough downtime, looking for people one-on-one, or, I think if an extrovert said, I'm going to have a few people over, that few people would be 10, 12, or 14. And an introvert saying, I'm going to have a few people over, would be 1, 2, or 3. So our view of the world and the amount of energy we have and where we get our pleasure and thrive is very different. I think, unfortunately, extroverts don't understand us. And part of us almost envies the extroverts because they seem so at ease. But that is not who we are. We don't want the limelight. We're great problem solvers. We are wonderful conversationalists. But we have to realize, as the minority, that we control our environment and the life we want to create for ourselves. There's a book called Quiet, and in the back, here's a wonderful phrase. Love is essential. Gregariousness is not. Gregariousness is not. Gregarious is an extrovert. Love we express in all kinds of ways. And if you think about the strength of an introvert, which is one-on-one, they are probably very effective at expressing love, maybe more than the extrovert. Now we have a slide, Lou.
Sometimes introverts fool people, though, because people don't think we are introverts. I've had a lot of people say that to me. I never thought you were an introvert, but the fact is that
that's a great point.
Yeah.
There are strong introverts and introverts. They're almost like an extrovert. Also, introverts can learn to be, they can extrovert if they need to for their job. But boy, after that presentation, they are running back to their offices to re-energize. Thank you for finding the slide, Lou. I love this slide. Meeting new people. Look at poor Dumbo. He's all closed in. His ears are down. He is not a happy elephant. But when Dumbo meets with people he knows, usually one-on-one, look how free he is. He is open and he's involved and he is happy. So we're hoping that our thoughts on this have made you appreciate you are special. You are simply different from. Your world is different from the world of an extrovert. And unfortunately, as a minority, you see an awful lot of extroversion going on, and you have to seek out and speak up when you see someone of interest. Now, Karen and I met at a TLC meeting. She looked interesting to me, and I thought, there's something about her. I think I would like to know her. And I walked over and I asked her if she could go for a cup of coffee. And look at where we are now, doing presentations and being friends. So
Together.
we don't have to accept the majority's style of life. We have our own that makes us thrive. Thoughts, Karen?
Well, I just want to say that we're not saying, I don't want anybody to think that we're slamming extroverts because they
No.
have their place in our world too. And they
Yes.
have their gifts, but this is about us. So we're focusing on the positive things about us as introverts.
You know, I thought when I saw so many people sign up that maybe we could have a revolution of introverts just from the group that
Introverts
was here.
unite.
Yeah, unite. And then I thought, oh, but we don't like groups. So I think we're gonna end on that note.